How you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
So welcome to this very unorthodox kind of meeting here. I love talking about real estate because that's the business I'm in, and I know that you've got some great stories. So we're really looking forward to hearing those. Before we do that, though, I'd like to just talk a little bit about you and what your sweet spot is, what you do. You're an estate planning attorney. I know that when I was reading up on you, it's not only mixing your knowledge, but the compassion that comes along with your job. But that's one of the things that I thought really stood out to me. But tell us about what about yourself and what makes you tick, what you like doing, that kind of thing.
Well, in terms of my profession, as you said, I do estate planning, probate, and trust law. I try and focus more on the human elements because even though the tax and other elements are important, the bottom line is that a lot of times estate planning attorneys and CPAs and financial advisors and others all working together create this wonderful estate plan that's put into on very nice paper into very nice notebook. And then when
Hmm.
mom or dad has their stroke or dies, then things don't work out quite as well once the plan collides with humanity. And
Hmm.
so what I try and do a lot of times, because I think a lot of that has to do with poor communication among family, is to encourage communication. So the first time that kids hear the estate plan is not after mom and dad have their stroke or die, but beforehand. So they have some sense of what's going to go on, who's going to be in charge, and those kinds of things. So those are
Hmm.
paramount in my focus, which is also one of the reasons why I probably focus a lot more than others in my field on healthcare directives and the issues that come up before death.
Right, right. Yeah, my wife and I had a plan done years and years ago, and recently we said, when's the last time we updated it? And because we adopted our daughter since then, and that's a lot of years ago, and we really need to change this up. There's some big changes in our lives, and so we did it, and it was amazing. Because I thought, oh, this shouldn't take more than 20 minutes. Ask me some questions. Let's wrap this baby up. We already have one, and gosh, so many questions came up, and I was kind of like, what? I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. It was. I'm glad we did it though, because I want to make sure that no matter what happens, that with my wife and with me, that that we're heard, that our voice is heard if something is to happen.
Good that those questions were raised because there's a lot more to it a lot of times than people think.
So, what's the most complicated question? Do you think? What is the one that you have the most difficult going over with people, or that seems to be the biggest challenge with people?
Well, one of the challenges is deciding who's going to be in charge when you are either incapacitated or after your death. And there are some people who have very logical people who could act in their place. There's other people who feel like they have no one. And a lot of times, they have their longtime CPA, but then their CPA drops dead. Uh, yeah, because a lot of the people we trust and rely on are our contemporaries. And as we get older, not all of them are still around or capable. So that is often what a lot of people have difficulties with. And that is probably the number one issue that prompts people to come back into my office
Hmm.
after a year or two or seven and to say we need to make some changes just because the people we appointed as successor trustees are no longer viable. And the same holds true with the healthcare directives.
Hmm.
So, that's an even more difficult position. And for a lot of people, they're a lot more concerned about who will make their health decisions than they are about who will make financial decisions.
Right. Because you don't want the guy who's just going to immediately say, "Pull the plug."
You might. It depends on your views.
It was interesting because I've got an aunt who's 99. I also helped. I don't want to make it sound like such a big deal, but I also helped with my uncle a lot before he passed. And so I've gone through a lot of the directives and wanted to make sure. Same with my mom. And I think it's so good to know. But the first time I started going through it, I was overwhelmed. But now, to me, it's like I just want to know that, I don't want to be, unless I know that I'm going to have a substantial, or at least close to the kind of life that I had before. If I was just going to be, bedridden and I can hardly talk and I have tubes and be kept alive, I'm going like, maybe it's time for me to bow out gracefully and, I'll see the rest of you guys in the blink of an eye anyway. And so, but that was heavy at first. It's not as much anymore, but that was a heavy thing for me, for sure.
And it's also important if you're making decisions for other people to separate out what you might want with
Correct.
what they want, because your job is to communicate to the healthcare team what they would want. And and the more you know about it, the more regularly you have conversations with the person about that, the easier it is for you to handle what is otherwise a very difficult position to be in. Because if you are confident that you know enough that you're just their spokesperson, you think of yourself as their spokesperson. You're not making any decisions. You're
Hmm.
just communicating to the healthcare team what it is that they would say if they were capable of giving directions.
Right, right. I think it's really important to keep it updated too, because I remember taking my uncle into a hospital, and they were going, and I said, "Do you have his pulse?" Da, da, da. And they said, "Yes." I said, "Great." They said, "Because we understand he wants to be kept alive. No, if there's any way." And I'm going, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! What are you talking about? Let me see what pulse you have." They didn't have the right one, and it's like the last thing he wanted. That's the last thing is when it's time. He says, "I want to. I don't want to be kept alive. When is ready to call me," and so we had to change it right there. But the fact that they had the wrong one. Boy, I tell you, you got to really having an advocate. I think is crucial in these kinds of times.
Very much so. Yeah, and records that hospitals have are not always accurate.
Hmm.
And a lot of times they don't have any records. You need to really have both a healthcare directive and if there's a post, also the post available so they could
Right.
review it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the great things about digitizing things too. But in this case with my uncle, they didn't. I said he's never said this before. So what I'm thinking happened is he was probably seeing a doctor. They were going through it, and and my uncle said it the way he was saying it the way he understood it. But the difference was because I'm his nephew, I would say, "Stop, stop, hold on. Are you saying this?" And he goes, "No." And I go, "Okay, okay," because that's what it sounds like you're saying. Just want to be sure. Now, can you repeat it back to me? And he would, and so we could get down to it because there's so many times his mind was somewhere else. And so there was no bad intentions, but someone didn't take the time, which should have been a family member, like me, to talk about it, like dig into it a little bit more and make sure that his wishes are met.
Yeah, and especially as people get older, it really is important to have somebody else whose hearing and retention is pretty good to be in the
Mm-hmm.
room with them when they're talking to their doctor, because a lot of times people who are older don't hear very well. They've been complaining to family members for weeks that they're not feeling well. They get into the
Yeah.
doctor's office. The doctor says, "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine." And so it's important because there's lots of people who don't understand. I mean, what I tell people is when I was in my 30s, I used to bring in index cards to write down what the doctor was telling me. So number one, I would remember, and my sister's a doctor, so I would call her and talk to her about it. But
Mhm.
so people generally are nervous when they're going into a doctor's office, and especially
Right.
when they see their mortality clearer than some people do at younger ages.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember being in with my aunt once, and by the way, my aunt's gonna be 100 this year,
Yeah,
and she's living alone.
yeah.
It's nuts. It's just nuts.
Uh-huh.
She is. I mean, it's really. Last night, go over there. I bring over some food. And we're going to have our movie date night together. So we just sit down in the bed, eat, and I make her a drink, but it has to be hardly anything in it. It's really just the thought of it because I don't want to get her loopy, and it's just so sweet. But I remember seeing a doctor once, and the doctor is sitting there talking. I'm standing next to the bed. She's sitting in there, and the doctor's talking to me, talking to me, talking to me. And she finally looks up. She goes, "Why is he talking to you?" And I was like,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's my tanta. But it was really, and I said, this is what you need to understand. I know you're just meeting us now. Is that I am like the consigliere. I am not the decision maker. She is completely able to make decisions. She will. So I need you to know that I will tell you my opinion, but she needs to be heard, and you need to slow down. It's not that she doesn't understand. Sometimes, like you just said, she doesn't hear. So just slow it down and let's make sure she really hears it because she's really freaking smart. And she's still, I mean, I can't even believe she's sharper than most people I know, even at 100.
That's really amazing. It
Yeah,
can be amazing.
yeah,
Most
definitely.
people slow down significantly, let's say after 80, but there's a few every so often that it's almost scary that how sharp they are at their age.
It's remarkable. It's remarkable. So we haven't even started with any real estate hell. We're 10 minutes in. So but I'm glad that we're talking. I really like I like your style, I like your tone. You're obviously a very caring person, and to have that in an estate planning attorney is wonderful. But I know you go through some heavy stuff too, because there's a lot of real estate that you deal with when it comes to an estate plan. So why don't you tell us some stories of what you've gone through that might make us cringe a little bit.
Well, given the discussion we've just had, I'll briefly mention something I learned a few years ago due to
Mm-hmm.
um, a sister of one of my clients. And that is the sister, consistent with her personality. She might have to go to the hospital, but she would not let the doctors treat her. She also refused to leave the hospital. So what I found out at that point in time, I had no idea, and again, I wasn't directly involved. I'm just hearing about it from my client, is that the hospital was threatening to file an unlawful detainer action against the sister. And it never even crossed my mind that, a hospital would ever have to do that.
I've never
And
heard of it.
yeah, I had never either. And so in terms of my personal experiences in dealing with real estate professionally, um, I could start with my biggest issue, which has to do with people in your profession,
Mm-hmm.
um, if you don't mind, and that is the transfer disclosure statement that is required by California law, but is not required of fiduciaries who are selling the property in the course of trust or probate administration. So
Mm-hmm.
that basically, as long as it hasn't been their primary residence. So that basically means that after somebody dies or becomes incapacitated and their house has to be sold, the trustee can sell it, and the disclosures required of homeowners on the transfer disclosure statement are not required of the fiduciary because they often don't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, from what I understand from other attorneys who do residential real estate litigation, I have never done that. It is the hot button issue in residential real estate litigation where disclosures
Big.
not made. So, you know, so what had happened is the legislature said fiduciaries don't have to sign a transfer disclosure statement. So then the California Association of Realtors, whose interest it is, I think, in large part to protect realtors, um, created a different form called an exempt seller disclosure statement.
Yep.
And when attorneys like me would not allow their clients to sign, and I'm certainly not the only one, either the transfer disclosure statement or the exempt seller disclosure statement, they then stuck some language in the standard. I don't remember if it was the listing agreement or purchase and sale agreement where the fiduciary is becoming contractually obligated to make the disclosures.
Mm-hmm.
So I sometimes get pushback from realtors, and I don't give people real estate advice. I don't, not really all that interested in the legal advice that realtors want to give to my clients unless
Mm-hmm.
they're willing to indemnify my clients and pay the costs of any lawsuits that come as a result of my clients making disclosures and then that they weren't required by law to make, and then
Mm-hmm.
being sued for the failure to disclose or inaccurate disclosure. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it is a difficulty. It's one of the reasons why when I talk to clients, I tell them I want to make sure that they are using a realtor who has experience in the trust and probate fields.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, I will talk to the realtor about these issues because a lot of times, they'll just say to their staff, generate the seller documents to sign, and the transfer disclosure statement ends up in there, even though, the realtor knows that it shouldn't be. So that is probably my biggest pet peeve
Mhm.
when it comes to probate and trust sales that I have in the process.
So I have a question for you because I totally get that with the TDS. There's also with the seller property questionnaire. It's like you're asking them to comment on stuff that they can't even possibly know about. And they might just be coming up with, I heard this, or I thought dad said this. It's just a recipe for disaster, totally. But with the ESD, so that's what our company, they say they still want them to at least fill that out, and anything they know to be fact, just that but you don't make up anything. You're not pulling something out of the sky. Why would you not want them to fill out that one? I know not about the TDS and SPQ, but why not the ESD?
Well, my view is that if they're not required by law to fill it out, then they should not fill it out.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't foresee all of the trouble. And, I mean, in a lot of respects, I tell people, I'm paid to be paranoid. So if
Hmm.
they're not required by law to fill it out, then I don't believe they should fill it out.
Okay. Okay. Well, I
And
respect
I
that.
know a lot of agencies, want it, and I
Hmm.
understand that they would want it. And it's a very easy question. If the law's been changed and my client is required to sign it, just point me out to the statute. And if not, then they're not signing.
So what about things like, let's say, if someone's passed away there in the last 3 years, that kind of stuff. So, because where would that? Are you saying that they wouldn't be disclosing any of that stuff then?
No, that's required to be disclosed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Because so
There are
so
certain
what?
things that are required to be disclosed, and such as a death on the property in the past
Mhm.
3 years, and for those types of things, the fiduciary needs to disclose them.
And when what document would they fill out then on that? Because that's where I know it's on the TDS but on the ESD it identifies that as well. Is there somewhere else that you would something other document that would be filled out or something or?
I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah,
Mhm.
I suspect the answer is yes, but I don't know if
Okay,
it's pre-filled or whether we just add it you know,
an
as a
addendum.
line in one of the other documents.
Okay, okay. Well, that's interesting because I hadn't heard it said the way you're saying before, but the reality is that I can see that being very protective of your clients because sometimes things get disclosed and they were wrong and they misunderstood the document or something like that. So I totally get that. Very good. I'll tell you the most issues that we have. It comes down to disclosures.
Mhm.
That's almost always, and whether it's a probate or whatever it happens to, even a straight sale, when clients, if it's a client where they're required to fill out the TDS or SBQ or those documents, they say, should I say? And I'm saying, if you're asking me, I think just just don't make shit up. I mean, don't say because a contractor once I think told my mom that this was happening with the plumbing. You don't know for sure, but whatever you know, just don't color it. Don't act like a contractor. Don't be. I don't want any of your opinion. You just say there's a crack in the wall in the bedroom, and this is and whatever. But you're not going to put it's a large crack or there's no problems. There's no problems with this crack. Can you just put that there's a crack in the wall? That's what I'm trying to tell you. Yeah, well, it's so funny because when I'm talking to an attorney like yourself and I start to say stuff, I think, I wonder if he's going to agree because this is going to suck if he doesn't agree with what I'm about to
Those
say.
be edited out.
Yeah, really.
Change the response,
It's
take
my
a yes
show.
from something else and stick it in
It,
there. Yeah.
it's my show. So yeah, but I had one time a guy from a former teammate, come in and he looks at the crack in the garage and the slab, and he goes, oh gosh, there's definitely foundation issues here. I'm going, are you a contractor? What? Why are you? It was really interesting because he thought that he knew better, and so, but when I saw it, it was a minor, and I figured it was probably just like a stress crack that you get in most concrete stuff. But I said, you know what? Why don't we head this off? Let's just bring an expert in, a professional who can look at it advise on it and say, here are the three things you can do, or you can do nothing at all. That he can, but let's just get the truth from a professional. So we did that. When someone came in and they saw that, I said, well, this is what our professional said. You guys, we encourage you to inspect on your own, da 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 da, and it becomes a non-issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, you don't want a non-expert to start
It
creating.
happens. It happens
Yeah.
so much. It's hysterical. It's
Yeah.
hysterical. But this isn't about me. Let's hear another one of your stories.
Um, you know, the story I'm about to tell relates to what I thought was a probate and then turned into three separate probates. And essentially, the principle is that if nothing is done after the first death with respect to the real property, and nothing is done after the second death, and sometimes things are going to have to be done after the third death if it's, and what happened is that, uh, my client who lived out of state was not, um, really active in dealing with his family members. And then the mother died, and
Mm-hmm.
a sibling stayed in the house and lived in the house for many years afterwards. And my client didn't might have had some minimal contact with them, but after the mother's death and after coming out for that, had minimal contact. And then that sibling died.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out there was a third sibling too who had died in between the mother and the other sibling. And we needed a probate proceeding for the mother who had died probably, 15 years before we opened her probate because the title was in her name alone. And then I went to the three kids. And then we had to do separate proceedings for each of the three kids because each was deemed to have inherited a third of the house
Mm-hmm.
year of the mother's death. I think it was 2008. And and so it turned out to be a much bigger hassle than anticipated, simply because the one sibling who lived out of state and wasn't necessarily heavily involved in his family's life, uh, didn't at least monitor anything or question his sibling about whether anything was done after the mother's death, and just lived his own life and moved on. So it became,
Mm-hmm.
much more stressful for him, and frankly for me too. Um, so, periodically take a look at what's going on, and if people die, maybe have somebody take a look at the title to the house to see how
Mm-hmm.
the title was held, recognizing that everything starts with title, because
Mm-hmm.
the mother had already put the children's name on title, then it would have been a lot easier. But
Right.
she didn't. And so it turned out to be a complete mess. Um, and so, there's so many different factual circumstances that could happen. But if you have a relative who dies on real property and you're not sure what, if anything, has been done, especially if it's a parent, um, you might want to check title and try and see if anything needs to be done, and talk to a probate attorney or a realtor to
Right.
help you get the current vesting, and see if what needs to be done.
Right. Well, I like the idea. I mean, it's great to get the vesting, but talk to a guy like you
Yeah.
who can look at it as a whole, because I think there's so many moving pieces, so many. There's another guest we had on an attorney. He was talking about how uh, a bunch of these documents were forged. Even the judge's signature was forged. And I'm going, what? What are you talking about? And the hell that he had to unravel to figure everything out. And I guess it was some type of a celebrity deal, so he couldn't give the name on air. But that
Uh,
was. Can you imagine
and
forging a judge's signature?
I mean, there are people who happily forge anybody's signature if they think
Mm-hmm.
they could make money off the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So and the other thing that surprised me a lot of years ago when I heard about it, I don't know that it's still true, but at that time I was told that the LA District Attorney's Office had a division that dealt with nothing other than fraud by notaries, which
Really?
really shocked me. But then I started thinking about it, and well, I don't know. I assume there's no background check on notaries, and even if somebody turns out to be legitimate, if somebody says, hey, if say you notarize this guy's signature, even though
Hmm.
you didn't, I'll pay you 25,000. And I suspect some notaries will do that. So
Wow. But
that's,
there's no background check?
I really don't know. I was a notary many years ago till I
Uh-huh.
decided it was too much of a hassle and
Hmm.
they just created additional rules and the whole system fell apart when a notary no
Hmm.
longer was active notary because then the Secretary of State didn't know where they were. They didn't know who had the notary book. It's the system's sort of a joke, but they just kept adding more and more regulations, and I decided I'm done.
Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah,
I wouldn't even consider, I wouldn't even have thought of that. Fraud by notaries.
yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Any way to make a buck.
yeah.
Hey, do you have any other real estate stories you want to share?
One of them I had thought about. I had quite a number of years ago, a client who was elderly and she had no children and she was single. And I was referred to her by her financial advisor. And I went in and we did some estate planning for her, including a trust. And then at some point, some years later, the financial advisor contacted me and said, she has put title of her house, moved it out of the trust, and moved it into joint tenancy with one of the guys who sort of she hangs out with. And I mean, and a lot of older people, even if they have children who they talk to, whether it's once a day or once a week or once a month, there's a lot of time during the day where they might want attention and they're not necessarily getting it. And that's why there's this huge industry of elder abuse that's
Right.
out there. So, uh, so the question was, what do we do about it?
Hmm.
And I spoke to an investigator I knew, and I also made sure that it was reported to the police. So it was
Hmm.
reported to the LAPD, and then sometime later, I contacted the LAPD to find out what, if anything, was being done with the report, because my interest was solely not to get this hanger-on prosecuted, um, but to get title back from him, have him sign the title back to her so she could put it back in her trust. And I ended up finally getting through to the officer who identified himself as the one who delegates these files to
Hmm.
the officers to investigate. And I was honest with him. I said, look, I have a former LAPD officer who's now a private investigator, and I'm just trying to figure out whether I should send him out to find this guy and, try and
Hmm.
convince him that it's better for him to sign it back over than not,
Hmm.
or whether I should wait till you guys investigate.
Hmm.
Um, and the guy on the phone said to me, look, I don't investigate these cases. I just assign it to them. But it's the same people who handle, burglaries or robberies that are going to be investigating this. So if they have pile of files on top of their desk, and a
Hmm.
bunch of them are for 7-Elevens that were robbed, and they've got videotape, and then there's
Hmm.
this file about this elderly woman who, maybe it was her idea to put this guy in title. Maybe it was his idea for her to put this
Right.
guy in title. They're going to look at that file and put it at the bottom of the pile and go to 7-Eleven.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I told the private investigator, go try and find the guy. And she pretty much, the client pretty much knew where he now. And he, no heavy-handed stuff from what the PI told me. Just he got the guy to sign it back over, and we were able to transfer it back into her trust.
He was
So,
convincing.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and I don't even know if it was very difficult, other than to say, if you sign it back over, you likely are not going to be prosecuted. If you don't sign it back over, I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Right.
Um, Yeah, but so that was another thing, and then I've had other clients experience, and frankly, I experienced personally with my mother, who I called every day. I mean, most of her social life was, me calling her every day, and it turns out that, there were other people, there were fraudsters calling, and this is rampant. in
Hmm.
California. Elder abuse is almost the perfect crime, I learned, because especially if you're perpetrating elder abuse from a state outside of California, so you're calling from Florida, uh,
Hmm.
seniors in California to try and defraud them, and you succeed, the odds, according to what one police officer told me, that if it's reported out here, they do up a report, and then they send it to Florida, it's highly unlikely that whatever department should be involved in Florida trying to find the guy, the perpetrator is going to take the time to do that because they've got enough of their own problems for their citizens in their state, probably who are being defrauded by shysters in California. And it's very frustrating because law enforcement is to a great extent very ineffective when it comes to elder abuse, and that
Hmm.
sometimes involves real property.
I'm surprised that I mean, it's interesting that we go to the same investigators that would be investigating, a 7-Eleven robbery or something like that. It's just you would think that they'd have, I don't know, like people kind of dedicated to this kind of thing since it's so rampant. I'm kind of surprised
Yeah,
that they don't.
yeah. I mean, and this was a long time ago.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, uh, even when that happens, I remember I heard a retired FBI guy who talked about this subject and how in the mid
Hmm.
90s, before the internet was a big thing, and the FBI rarely gets involved in elder abuse cases, but when the uh, the dollars are big enough, they will do it to try and make a splash, and that's what happened here. It was involved over $1 million against
Hmm.
all these, by all these people, perpetrators against elders, and so they arrested like 43 people or something like that. They had a big press conference in D.C.
Right.
so it would get national publicity. And the following day, the victim started getting telephone calls from perpetrators saying, "If you give me $10,000, I will help you get your money back."
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. That is just pathetic. It just, I had someone try to, every now and then, someone, because I'm online a lot, people use my likeness, and all of a sudden I'll get a call from someone saying, I think, I think someone's using your likeness to try to get, and my mom thinks she's in love with you. And I'm going, I'm thinking, are you trying to take me right now? So I don't know if it's like a double or a triple kind of, And it's interesting. I said, hold on a second. Let me get my wife on the phone. She's a lot smarter than me. And it turns out that it was the real deal. And the poor woman thought she was in love with me. The way the daughter found out is she saw a pin that I had, looked me up, saw what was going on. And so we got the mom on the phone, and I said, I'm so sorry. I said, the picture you're seeing, I'm a married man, I've got a family, and I'm so sorry this is being done to you. This is so sad, but I wanted you to hear this. And it turns out the guy was trying to take her
Mm.
for a bunch of money, and using my red hair and freckle face, mug to be a little convincing. And so never heard back from them again, but it was just like, wow, did that just happen? And I felt really bad. Never even met the woman, but thank God her daughter was so smart and figured out how to get in touch with me. And so, but I was cautious myself, very cautious, you know, because
Yeah,
that would have been a great way to get me, convince
yeah,
me, and I want to be the good guy, and then all of a sudden, you know. But I think anytime anyone asks for money, that's then when there's money requested, it becomes very different.
yeah.
Yeah. It's sad. It's sad. So, last question for you.
Sure.
I know that I believe you do have a cause or a charity or that's close to your heart. Would you like to share that? We'd love to shine a light on that.
Sure. I mean, for 23 years, I was on the board of directors of the cancer support community, Valley Ventura, Santa Barbara. Used to be called the Wellness Community, then it was called the Cancer Support Community, and it provides two programs of education and support for people with cancer and their loved ones. And, what you could do in an hour having a group discussion with others who have cancer or who have loved ones with cancer,
Hmm.
You could learn more there, as everybody used to tell me, than you would learn in all of your appointments with all of your oncologists. So there's another one in Pasadena. I think there's one in the South Bay. There's various cancer support communities throughout the United
Hmm.
States. So all the programs are provided free of charge to the participants,
Wow.
and it's a great organization and does a tremendous amount of good for people with cancer and their loved ones.